the scene in Full Metal Jacket where he asks the main character, do you deny the virgin birth of Christ? And the guy's like, yeah, I don't believe that. And he punches him in the stomach. His drill sergeant punches him in the stomach and then says, you're in charge. It's basically like, all right, you're the guy who can own something and say, despite negative consequences, I'm making a decision. That's who I want in charge of the squad.
Well, I'd have been against it, but they're back. Mark and Mike. It doesn't take a genius.
Ramsey!
Marshall, what a pleasure to see you. And I'm just going to tell you something that's never happened before. This must be a new Zoom feature, but usually it flashes this big window up that says he's recording now, and it no longer does that. There's just a little bar at the top telling me you're recording. So I guess I have to be like extra careful that you're not, recording me when I don't know it, I guess is the point.
Like we've ever said anything on or off the record that would get us, canceled or sued or our conversations, even unrecorded, probably in the vanilla PG-13 at the max.
That happened to me when I applied for the global entry passport system where you get, TSA pre-check and all that. This woman with customs, she's an agent, she's got a holstered pistol and she's, taking me through this whole process and very stern, and I'm getting fingerprinted, and she sits back and says, okay, so here's how this goes. In 24 hours, you're going to find out whether or not we approved you. And oh, you're approved. Huh. Apparently I was so vanilla that the system was like, oh yeah, go ahead and give it to him. We don't even need to check that.
Yeah.
This guy's super vanilla.
Yeah. That guy. Yeah. His worst offense was he went out in public with a milk mustache. Right. It's the most offensive thing he's ever done. It's like,
well, after drinking milk in a dirty glass. But
yeah.
Anyway,
because you're a wild man. Yeah. So well, that happened to me the other day. I accidentally replied all to an email, and I thought I just replied to the originator. And then I sent it, and I was like, my heart sank. And then I went back and read it and was like, no, there's nothing.
Yeah. Nobody's going to care.
Yeah, nobody's going to care what I wrote back to that guy. It's just, it's not a problem.
Well, you know what you're doing there? You're in control of yourself, taking ownership of the things that you can be in control of. You've got freedom to do that, right? You got freedom to control yourself.
Yes, I could choose my response.
It's almost like we're leading up to a topic here.
Could be a topic just around the corner.
I sense it. I have something cool that I want to share with you. So I've been reading Up From Slavery, the memoir of Booker T. Washington, founder of the Tuskegee Institute. Goodness, he's probably in the top 10 of greatest Americans, in my opinion. Like he's up there with, Lincoln and Washington. And this memoir is just, it's stunning. I actually haven't finished it. I just got so excited about this that I wanted to bring this to our audience, both members, as soon as I could. So I just want to tell a little bit of the story. He basically talks about the fact that freedom comes with some responsibility, and the fact that freedom comes with responsibility has a lot to say about how we apply it in our lives. So I think you and I are going to talk about it from a couple of different perspectives, but I got to share the quote so that, you can kind of appreciate what's going on here. So he talks about being a boy and how, as a boy, he was there when the Emancipation Proclamation was read in his presence. And so I'll try to quote little bits and pieces here of his recollections of what happened. So he says, for some minutes, there was great rejoicing and thanksgiving and wild scenes of ecstasy. But there was no feeling of bitterness. In fact, there was pity among the slaves for our former owners. So hold on to that thought. They were pitying the former owners. And then he says this: the wild rejoicing on the part of the emancipated colored people lasted but for a brief period, for I noticed that by the time they returned to their cabins, there was a change in their feelings. The great responsibility of being free, of having charge of themselves, of having to think and plan for themselves and their children, seemed to take possession of them. It was very much like suddenly turning a youth of 10 or 12 years out into the world to provide for himself. So he goes on to talk about, rearing children, education, citizenship, establishing and supporting churches. It, just goes on and on talking about, whoa, now we have freedom from slavery, but now we've got the freedom to do what we will with our time and our resources and our attention and our brain power. And now we own it. Now we're responsible for it. So the book goes on to talk about how the white people weren't really ready for it. Like the slave owners, they didn't have a trade. They didn't know how to keep the fence posts from falling over. They didn't know how to cook for themselves. I mean, just all sorts of wild things that in the South, white people just had no clue of, and were in some cases after the Civil War were destitute, became drunks. Their slaves were supporting them. And I've got a couple articles on the Hip Socket blog that we'll link to. Even in the 1830s, they were noticing this. You look at the north side of the Ohio River, all this industry, all these manicured fields and progress and action. And you look on the Kentucky side, and it's like just overgrown everything. Just, a few slaves lazily walking through a field. There's nothing going on. The white people didn't know how to work. They didn't know how to be responsible for themselves. So there's part one, is this Emancipation Proclamation leading to, oh man, wow, now it's on us. But you get over to, I think it's chapter 2, and he talks about going to school for the first time. And I'm not going to read a big portion here, but basically his mom says, I know everybody has a hat. I know you want a hat. I'm not buying you a hat. We ain't got the money. I will make you a hat. And he calls it the homespun cap. And he says, the lesson that my mother taught me in this has always remained with me, and I have tried as best I could to teach it to others. I have always felt proud whenever I think of the incident that my mother had strength of character enough not to be led into the temptation of seeming to be that which she was not, of trying to impress my schoolmates and others with the fact that she was able to buy me a store hat when she was not. And he says, by the way, some of my classmates that had store hats, they're now in the penitentiary. They're now bankrupt. I mean, it couldn't be more perfect. It's such a great book. But so those are the bits and pieces that I wanted to share. And it just, I guess I'll shut up and let you react to that. But I mean, this is somebody living through the Civil War, seeing the emancipation of slavery of his people, and then looking around and seeing, we do something with this now. We have to choose what we do with what we now own. I just thought it was super powerful, and I want to talk about it.
No, it's fantastic. The great responsibility of being free.
Yeah.
You take this could relate to child rearing, where your kids, right, where they want more autonomy, more freedom, and as an adult, whether or not maybe some are ready and then some aren't. It's not necessarily a chronological thing, a board on date thing. It's based upon, are they capable of accepting that responsibility and making good decisions within that. We also had a more recent example in the 20th century. Our a profoundly successful military, our U.S. military, went in and we overthrew a dictator. Yep. And the goal was this country would just become self-governing. It would form a democracy, and people would join form little city councils, and they build schools and just take care of themselves. And it just devolved into chaos.
Yep.
Because they'd never done it before.
Right.
They always had somebody telling them exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Yep. And when we gave them all the freedom all at one time, it's still not right. Right. They're still struggling to come to terms with the responsibility that comes with that kind of autonomy.
Yeah, it's like the Pinocchio story, right? Where he runs off to the island where he can do whatever he wants, and that's where you become a donkey. In the story, that's what happens is you just waste all your time and money and eat whatever you want, and you end up a donkey. I don't think he chose donkey by accident. Like that was on purpose. And if you think all the way back to, I know this is my hobby horse, but the classical education of the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the early church fathers, all the way up to the 1800s, they were still being classically educated, learning Latin and so on. Well, was it because we were, you know, was Latin like, this hotbed of, how to make money? Was it, something that you just had to have to be part of high society? Not really. It was more like learning discipline. And that's why it was called the liberal arts. It was grammar, logic, rhetoric. Uh, Latin was a heck of a way to take yourself through these sets of skills. They had 7 of them that were these liberal arts. Liberal meant liberated. This was, you need to know these things to be a free person. You need to have these virtues, these behaviors down so that you can go about being somebody who can be in charge of themselves and not end up a slave. Today we have slaves to our feelings, people that can't seem to get past their own passions and let those passions dictate their mood, their behavior. They ask for their behavior to be excused because of the fact that their passions led them a certain direction. Let alone, we could talk forever about politics and marketing and the different things where we get swayed by somebody else's message. We're a slave to that when we do that. There are things you can do to be in control and take ownership, have responsibility for your own freedom, and I think that's part and parcel with what's happening with places where America has gone in and hasn't set things up. And I think it's actually true of us today in America. I'm not sure that we are so good at having our own freedom without also understanding how to exercise responsibility. Huge opportunity for us.
Oh yeah, yeah. You see it whether it's with money or social media, where people just aren't managing their time or their resources in the most effective manner.
Yep.
We also see this in the, as you were talking, I thought about, we see this in the business setting.
Yeah.
And we think about, we talk a lot with managers about empowerment, empowering their employees to make decisions in the moment and to take care of the customer, solve the problem. And they don't do it. The team member, the employee is constantly coming back to the manager saying, "Hey, here's my situation," and the manager's, he's trying to coach them through it and prompt them through it. All right, so what what do you think you should do? If I were standing there, what do you think I would do in the same situation? And a lot of times the team member will guess correctly. Well, I probably do this. Exactly. You know
Go
what?
do that.
Go do it. And the manager can't figure out, why don't they just do this without me? And it's that the great responsibility of being free. Not everybody wants it.
Yep.
How many times have we worked in an empowerment situation and somebody's finally just said, "Just tell me what to do."
Right.
Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they will execute it flawlessly if we tell them what to do. And at that point, you have to ascertain, how much am I paying this person? Because at this point, I've got an automaton, I've got a robot, that I have to program for all these scenarios that will respond in specific ways, but has no capability of critical thinking, improvisation, accepting of empowerment, acting within a scope of responsibility. How valuable is that to my organization?
Well, you talk about this so plays into how our psychology just is wired into these situations, and we talk about the drama triangle, and we don't need to go through the whole the whole model, but there's this idea that I'm this victim in the scenario. right? And I as the boss have had to rescue this person who's the victim. They just can't seem to do it, and I'm going to step in and take over and take responsibility and make choices for them, and I'll be on the hook. And what ends up happening is that boss eventually feels like they're the victim. That villain down there is persecuting me by making me responsible for all this stuff, and I'm just helpless. I'm just stuck here. And of course, the secret is to get out of the drama triangle. Don't be a persecutor. Don't be a victim. Don't be even a rescuer. Instead, say, okay, what do I own here? And what decisions could I make where I've got responsibility and some freedom to exercise to make some decisions? And it might be decisions around, I need to coach this person a different way. I need to replace this person. And I take responsibility for the fact that that's on me to do that, instead of being stuck in this cycle of, oh man, I don't have freedom here, or I don't want freedom here. You get to make that call.
Oh no, that's huge. Well, I think there's a transparency that has to take place where the
Uh-huh.
where the leader has to tell the team member, when you make a decision, you're not going to be in trouble.
Yep.
Yeah, we will debrief, we'll have an after action review. We'll debrief the decision afterwards and talk about what else could you have done? Was that the best course of action? What could we do next time? But you will never get in trouble by trying to do or live up to the values that we espouse.
Yeah, and that's freedom too, right? We're giving that employee freedom to do some experimentation here, make some mistakes, and so on. And I'm owning, as the manager, I've got the freedom to punish, and I choose to withhold that, right? Like, I'm making a choice that I'm going to do things a different way, and I'm going to own that, right? Like that may mean that I've got people higher than me to answer to about this mistake that was made, and I'm going to be the one that falls on the sword, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're making a choice to do that. It's frankly, it's good boundaries as much as it is ownership and expressing your own freedom.
Oh yeah, one of the classic mistakes we see managers make is they just feel like they can't help themselves, and they do get on one person for accepting that empowerment, accepting that responsibility, making a decision, and then everybody else that wasn't involved is watching,
Uh-huh.
and they're like, "Oh, he just got hit with a stick.
Yep.
All right, I ain't deciding nothing. I'm taking
Yep.
all the problems to the boss, and the boss can make the final call on these. I'm not going to risk getting treated like the my fellow team member got treated."
Yep. Yep. 100%. It reminds me of the scene. This is probably not a great example, but the scene in Full Metal Jacket where he asks the main character, do you deny the virgin birth of Christ? And the guy's like, yeah, I don't believe that. And he punches him in the stomach. His drill sergeant punches him in the stomach and then says, you're in charge. It's basically like, all right, you're the guy who can own something and say, despite negative consequences, I'm making a decision. That's who I want in charge of the squad. And lots of people die later on, and war is hell, blah blah blah. But that little scene, like, you can understand why he made that decision. Like, I don't even agree with this guy personally. I think it's disgusting. And he's the one who can actually be a leader because he's willing to own things.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, what we're talking about here. Real leaders do this.
Yeah, they take a stand. They have values. Those values are communicated, and people who try to live within those that empowerment framework are celebrated, not executed, but celebrated.
Right.
And I think that's one of the keys we see to that is people sometimes they'll explain what they do, but they don't explain why they do it. And so
Yeah, that's so true.
now the team members left wondering, all right, this looks like the situation that was like the other one. So here's what I'm going to do. But because I don't know the why and all the factors that the manager weighed before they made that decision, I choose poorly. And now the manager's upset, unhappy. And if they don't have the emotional intelligence to restrain themselves, then all of a sudden the employee's in trouble.
So you've suggested that the manager needs to have a sense of transparency, not just in why you're doing what I'm asking you to do, but also in, hey, there won't be you getting in trouble as a result of this. We're looking to see you grow in your skills and decision making and so on in this area that I've empowered you in. And meanwhile, the employee has some opportunities here as well. And I think the biggest one is being really conscious of what you are doing with your time. I think that's really the if not the biggest, one of the biggest behaviors that you can really do here. And here's what I mean by that. On some cases, it could be like I've done in the past. I'm sure you've done. I'm going to literally track what I do every 15 minutes of a day, and I'm just going to take an inventory of where my time is going. And there's some time wasted, perhaps, or there's some time where I think I'm doing that, but it's really not as important as these other things. And there's this really big goal that I have, but I'm not doing anything with that. And so I'm just taking an inventory of, where is my time going? And the other way I mean that tracking your time is as I go through a work day, if I'm in the workplace and I'm going through a work day, really starting to think about, I was just given this new responsibility. It's a new behavior. It's a new mindset. And I've somehow got to keep that in my conscious mind that I'm doing this new thing. I'm trying out this new freedom and taking some chances, as you said. And I'm not going to do it unless I break out of the old behavior, that I've always done. And it's just muscle memory. And I just do it because I just do it. And start being really conscious of saying, okay, how am I spending my time now? There are some things that I could be doing. I could be trying out, who knows what it is, right? It's, it's a new word track. It's a, meeting with another department. It's a, some sort of a responsibility that I now have. I'm going to have to do something to be really conscious of that as I go forward. So I think you have to really be conscious of your time if you're going to be that employee who wants to really embrace a new freedom.
Oh, well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we also know that there's a time savings that comes with embracing the empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going to the manager, finding the manager, waiting for the manager to be free, presenting the problem to the manager, and then getting the managers asking you, well, what would you do? I'm already exhausted and I've wasted 20 minutes,
Right.
Making that decision in the moment and knowing that, yeah, there will be an after action review, but it's probably going to take a lot less time than the process of finding the manager to secure permission. So, just allowing there's a time saving factor, and the thing that we always tell employees, and you've heard many managers say it as well, and they just say, be the hero.
Mm.
You be the hero. You be
Yep.
the person who says, all right, here's what I'm gonna go ahead and knock 10% off of this, and we're gonna give you a ride home, and we're gonna throw in what I'm gonna be the hero, not
Yep.
the manager. Right. I'm the person's dealing with me. They see that I have empowerment. I'm willing to accept that responsibility and use it wisely. Man, that's pretty cool.
Powerful. And if you are an employee listening who feels like you'd like that from your manager, like, go have the conversation, right? Like, what is the limit? Like, what am I allowed to do before I have to turn it over to you? If that's unclear to you, go have that conversation and get that figured out, because man, you look like so confident in front of a client when you know where that line is and you can just waltz right up to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, and don't be surprised if you are that employee, when you ask the manager that question, you don't get an answer right away.
That's also true.
The manager
They
be
haven't
like,
thought about that.
that is an excellent question. I will ponder it for a day and get back to you, because I've
Right.
never thought about how far can my people go
Yep.
before they need to get me involved.
Yep.
Okay. All right. This is good stuff. I'll talk to you tomorrow when I've thought it through and
Yep.
could give you a more cogent answer. So,
Yep.
Yeah. And then in some cases, your manager will be super clear and have already thought it through. So, either way, be prepared for either contingency.
Well, I've said my piece. I just thought, how interesting that, again, we'll link to the articles, but in the 1830s, visitors to our country from Europe were noticing, like, man, handling responsibility seems to be a struggle for these folks who are free. And then when the slaves get freed, former slaves are noticing having freedom is a responsibility. And you fast forward to our day and age, and it's really no different. I get that we don't have slaves now, but I will point out that I had a machine do my laundry this morning. I've got a phone that's my secretary. I have all, I have all these resources at my fingertips, and I have all this free time as a result. What am I doing with it? Right? I'm free from a lot of obligations, but that also means I'm free to do the right thing as I work on growing myself and making a better impact in the world. So I hope this is a big encouragement to our listeners.
Absolutely, absolutely. Whether you're the boss or the team member, there are things that you can do.
That's right.
Either way. And speaking of accepting responsibility, the man who took on the greatest challenge for It Doesn't Take a Genius is to be our announcer with little or no guidance from us whatsoever. And I think it kind of
And he ran with that.
Yeah, it shows. Yeah, he did whatever he wanted. And, we've just accepted it. We are grateful and we appreciate it. So take it away, Mr. Wolf.
And that's it. Join us next time when you'll hear Mike say, well, I'm sure he'll say something pithy. Don't miss it. Next time, It Doesn't Take a Genius.
That's good enough.